Hi, my name is Josh Meese, and I teach at Watcom Middle School in the Bellingham School District. And I have been supervising interns from all over the place for probably 7-8 years now, and have had a great time hosting folks and learning as much from them as hopefully they're learning from me. So, I think the biggest thing is having that face-to-face meeting right away with the intern and just getting to know each other, realizing that there's going to be a 4 or 5 month relationship where you're working really closely hand in hand in your classroom, and opening up. I always tell my interns a little about myself, and here's my teaching philosophy, here's my some of the teaching strategies that I use, here's what our classrooms are going to look like, here are some of the philosophical curricular ideas that we work through, and getting that done before the school year even starts. Getting the teacher into the classroom and introducing those folks right away and learning names of kids is one of the biggest communication pieces, strategies that I hound from day one. Try to learn kids' names as quickly as possible.
My name is Stephanie Stroh. I teach at Shexon Middle School. I teach 6th grade language arts social studies and 8th grade AVID. I just finished my 15th year of teaching. So one of the ways that I help set up my interns for success before the kids ever get there is first, really getting to know them, but second of all, I think it's really important that they have their own space. I think that builds a sense of comfort. And as teachers, most of us spend a lot of time in our rooms. And because we always have kids with us, if we don't have kind of that rest place where we can go for planning or whatever else, it can start to feel uncomfortable and kind of without an anchor. That isn't to say that I spend any time sitting at my desk, and I don't want my interns sitting at their desk when kids are in the room. We're up and we're interacting, but them having that place where they know where their supplies are, and I shop the school supply sales over the summer, so I have a bunch of things that I kind of load their desk with, and they can pick out some things. And then really just kind of going over my philosophy of education, hearing what their philosophy is. If it's going to be a more extended internship, getting to know what their comfort level is going in, how much experience they have working with kids, and do they want to start just kind of observing, or do they want to start engaging with smaller groups, or do they want to start engaging with the larger group?
My name is Lisa Conlon, and I teach at Carl Kosher Elementary School. It's a Title I school here in Bellingham. And I have been teaching for approximately 28 years. I look at my interns as I look at any other adult that walks in the room and any other learner. So I would imagine that my strategy I use with any learner is to try to kind of pick their brain. I'm trying to get into their head and ask enough questions about where they're thinking. So instead of assuming that my intern did X, Y, or Z, is to actually ask them about their thinking process. And like teaching and learning anywhere, you're oftentimes surprised. So you make assumptions. So I think that's probably my best strategy, is to not assume that they're doing something for a particular reason. Communication style, I think that works best with interns, is to be very genuine, very honest. I think that I communicate by trying to explain my decision making, and that there's not one way to teach, there's many ways. And I think I'm always interested in that they understand why I'm making certain decisions.
Day 1 or day 2, generally there's an introduction that we go through with the students. So that might involve technology, a PowerPoint or a video or something like that, so that the kids start to see the intern from day 1 as that's another teacher in the room. And their voice is as important as the teachers, and it's also as important as any other person in the room. So that's one of the ways that I help to set up my interns for success.
We send out a letter at the very beginning of the year that goes out, and it's kind of our PE contract. This is how we dress in PE. This is how you're assessed in PE, and these are some things that we do in PE. We put the intern's name right on the letter, and we put their extension, their phone extension, just like their one of us, because they are one of us. And then at staff meetings, introducing that person right away, sending out an email even before the school year starts, even before that first staff meeting, and introducing that person. There are now 3 of us in the PE department. This is Mr. or Miss so-and-so. Really helps get their name out there, and they become one of the faculty of the school. And in September, we do parent-teacher night, and giving them a part in our presentation to the parents and relatives is huge. And a lot of times parents will then, from their kids, realize the intern is running the show, and they just email the intern specifically about their questions. So those are strategies that I use. And I think the big one is parent-teacher night. That, for parents and guardians and community members, that gets them understanding who this person is in my kid's classroom.
One of the ways that I set communication expectations with my interns in the very beginning is to kind of outline who they will be communicating with, because it's everyone from brothers and sisters of students to their parents or guardians, grandparents in some cases, other staff members, administrators. And that's a lot to kind of juggle, because your communication style has to adapt based on your audience, and it's the same thing we teach kids. So we generally, within the first week before school or the first week that they're there, getting around to introduce them to key players in the building. And one of the things that I think interns kind of worry about, especially at staff meetings, is, am I allowed to share my thinking? Especially the first couple weeks, because I remember when I did my internship, there were ideas that I had that I really wanted to share, that I learned something new and I want to share it, but that wasn't always appropriate. And so helping the interns to know that depending on your audience, yeah, you are on equal footing, definitely share your opinion. Or, you know what, maybe in this case, listen a little bit more. Get some more information before you share your idea or send that email or write that letter that goes home. And then it goes back to a lot of modeling too. So when they start to take more control over the classroom, I start to forward them the emails that we get from families or students. And in the beginning, we'll sit side by side and we'll craft responses together. And then as they continue on, they start to just CC me on it. So I'm aware of what's going on, but they're really making more of the important decisions, because that's what it's going to be like when they start their first year of teaching and forevermore. So.
I also like having my interns do the warm-up. It's a great way of learning kids. I also let them do attendance every single day from the get-go, from day one, and that really helps them learn names as well. So I also try to help my interns understand that I'm an open door. Here's my number. Call me at home if you're ever working on lesson plans, curriculum unit plans, and just let's hash things out and let's go through things. And then once the intern really starts leading things from the beginning, whether it's warm-ups in PE or an entire lesson, I try to sit back and let them teach the lesson, and then at the end they can throw questions at me, and then I can then respond with ideas that I have of things that have popped up during the lesson. So
generally, kind of my go-to is that I teach something, and then the next period they teach something, and we're kind of going in and out of them teaching or me teaching. But usually there was a period in time where I worked at Fairhaven Middle School and I taught 4 sections of social studies. And so I could teach the first period of social studies, and then we could co-teach the second social studies. And then by the third social studies, they were able to get closer and closer to doing it all on their own. And then that gradual release of control, where they start to build confidence and they start to come up with ideas, or they want to try something different based on what their experience has been. So I generally like to do that, and that's the same type of thing that I like to do with my students. So there's the modeling part, and then there's the let's practice that together, and there's give it a try on your own, I'll help out if you need me, and then hopefully getting to the place where they're doing it all on their own, and I can be there if they need me.
I like to try to give the intern one station while I work 2 or 3 others, and not have them focus on the entire class of 30, 35, but they can focus on 5 or 6 kids and really develop the skills that they're going to end up teaching by themselves. And then gradually, as the weeks progress and they get more comfortable knowing kids' names, knowing the routine, developing their own teaching mannerisms and philosophy, I give them more control, broader control over more classes or over more stations, over more groups of kids until the point where they've, had the whole class by themselves.
So I really, when it starts morphing from co-teaching into a student teacher taking over a classroom, I very much want them to set it up the way that makes them feel comfortable. So if they arrive in my classroom, I ask them to tell me what their takeaway is. So are they feeling comfortable? On the other hand, learning is very uncomfortable, and the word that we use is dissonance. I try to help my interns understand that that dissonance is never going to go away. In fact, if it does go away, I think there's probably that they're not seeing the complexity of what's going on. So dissonance is being uncomfortable. So I think you always have to ask yourself, am I putting this routine in place? Am I treating kids a certain way because it makes me comfortable? Well, it's not about the teacher, it's about the students. And I also don't want the students to be too comfortable. They also have to understand how to deal with conflict, social conflict, how to control themselves, monitor their emotions.
One of the ways that I know when the intern is starting to get to the place where they've got the confidence to really take over is through conversation and dialogue with them. With some of my interns, it becomes really, really obvious because they start going off script of what I have been modeling, which is always exciting for me because that's where I can start learning too. And we can kind of compare and contrast, well, what worked well with this group of kids? What worked well with this group of kids? And then sometimes by a fourth period, when you're teaching the same thing over and over again, you have done it 3 times and you start to take the best strategies. And so it's almost like the fourth period that you have gets the very best teaching. And so the interns, they start to gain confidence and they start to interact with the kids in a less constrained way. They don't feel so tied to whatever the script or the lesson plan is that either I've come up with or they've come up with. They start to really engage their learners in more meaningful ways and let it go when they stumble and start to really, you can start to see them get really comfortable with themselves as a teacher. And that's when usually they're like, I want to try this on my own tomorrow. Or, can I try a few different things? Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes that's great and they can just keep going from there. And sometimes they're like, oh, that didn't go the way that I thought. So usually it's through dialogue and observation, for sure.
For me, when an intern stops looking to me when a student asks a question, that's a big factor that I look for. When they can answer the question that's posed by the kid, and also when the kid stops coming to me to ask questions and they go straight to the intern, that's kind of when I realize, boy, I can really take a step back and give a lot more control to the intern, if not all control to the intern. When I feel like the interns has good objectives set up and good learning targets and goes through those and is able to get through, not necessarily all of them in a class period because we have to modify lesson plans as we go along, but if they can get through and travel along their lesson plan without help from me, without redirect from me, if the kids are not busy, happy, good, but if the kids are working towards achieving the learning targets, and they're being safe while doing it, especially in the PE setting, for me, that's when I can kind of take a step back and start looking more strategically at, okay, what are some small things that we can hone because they've got all of these items good to go. For me, those are the things that I really look for.
At some point, the intern has to decide that they want to step up to the plate. And so and maybe that's where the word expectation comes in. My expectation is that they understand this is their opportunity to take as many risks as possible, and it's without any judgment. In other words, I'm not there as the UIC. I'm there as the support mechanism to allow them to take as many risks as possible and then get as much feedback from me and as encouragement from me. And so it's a really fun mentoring experience from that point of view, that I'm not there to judge. And I think I think it's the only experience that interns have where they truly are able to work with kids, have that growth mindset, make those mistakes, and not feel like it's going to show up on an evaluation. And because I'm just looking as to whether they're reflecting and growing.
Between the intern and I, to try to help them prepare themselves for the rest of the day or for the rest of the week or for the rest of the unit, I really try to ask questions first and let them ask questions to me. Because a lot of times what I might be thinking in my head that they already know, they might have big questions about. So I let them ask questions first. And I like to do that in the morning before the school day even starts. I like to do it at the beginning of a unit plan, especially if that's the unit plan that they're going to be solely responsible for, the assessments, the objectives, setting up the skill pieces, and making sure that interns don't wait until the last second to try to pull that off. And you know, as a teacher, we always have to be thinking ahead and modifying and reflecting as we go.
So having that flexibility to be able to support them in the ways that they need, I think is key. And I think people who work with interns need to be aware of that time has become an even more important commodity, and realizing that and being flexible is important.
So, and don't forget, in the student teaching handbook, there are a lot of tips, strategies, and ideas, and timelines that you can go through with your intern. Some general, when should the intern start taking over this? When should the intern start creating unit plans and lesson plans? When should the intern take over the classroom completely? And I found that this is a nice tool for me to refer back to when I'm having questions about how do I deal with this, or at what point are we in this 4 or 5 month relationship with our intern. So don't forget, this is a big tool that folks should use and interns should also use to help guide their path through the internship.
I oftentimes explain to them that their internship is theirs. They are not there to make my job easier. They're there for 2 reasons. They're there to help the kids, because having another adult in the room and having more conversations with an adult is going to help my students. So that's why I have interns, is I think it just makes for a more dynamic classroom where there's more conversations going on between students and adults.